First try. See that, guys? The time I didn't have a good segue, then I nailed the transition. It's fine. Wiped up. So this is where we can just talk about all the happy things that can happen, the way that we can make the world better. It is a lot of ways. And honestly, this is why I'm in this space now, is because the past 10 years I tried to fight against product distribution and help artisans all over the world try to distribute their products and create little supply chains. But at the end of the day, if they can't bank, how far can we take them? Everybody needs to have equal access to the same type of commerce, and without that, nothing else matters. Not nothing else. I mean, you still need to eat and drink. But I mean,
beyond life sustain.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems we can't solve until we solve these problems. Until we are able to provide commerce to everybody. So, what do you guys think about how all these things we just talked about, away from aside from all the money we can make and the Lambos to the moon, like, how can the world be better? How can the world be better for our children? Because ultimately that was what matters. We all get older, we've made all our money, we're about to die. That's what we think about, right?
Well, the fact that it can cut out the middleman is pretty awesome in my opinion. Right now we have someone that is consistently, someone always has to be in the middle to make sure that something happened. Well, we can do that using technology, so let's just do that and cut the human element out of it, because that's really the most corruptible part of the whole system.
Yeah.
I'll just, a contrarian view though, there are people that get paid money to do those jobs and to build that infrastructure to be the middleman or
Sure.
middle woman.
We can get them new jobs that are better and pay them more.
Okay.
I agree.
We'll educate them into, help building these systems out,
But if AI controls the world and we get out the middleman and all that stuff,
Cool.
do we put our
Then we can
humanity out of
spend our
business?
time enjoying the leisurely activities of being a human.
And if
We're being altruistic here.
I think some of the
Yeah,
beauty of this,
exactly. Universal income becomes
is-
feasible when we remove the dirty middleman.
as you were saying, we're right now, most of us aren't buying crypto so that we can give it away later to other people. That has been happening. The Pineapple Fund, this guy made millions upon millions, went on Reddit and said, what are some good charities I should donate to? And he's been giving away millions of dollars to all these awesome charities. I mean, that's great. But most of us are getting into this space because we want to get more money later. But the beauty of it is, although we're acting out of our own self-interests, which you could call selfishness, is that if what is affected by this is that suppliers now have lower operating costs, goods and services can be sold for a cheaper amount, then people have more discretionary income. And that is felt in greater proportion among the lower and middle classes. People who are already obscenely wealthy, it doesn't matter for them if their eggs and milk are 20 cents cheaper. Whereas someone who's on an extremely tight budget or fixed income, if you're able to lower the operating costs to supply their goods and services, that gives them more discretionary income, which increases their quality of life.
Absolutely, and and a lot of this allows for more active assets that are more liquid. When how much money is sitting there now in checking accounts or savings accounts? Everybody's money can always be active. Right now, it's insane how much money it just sits. It's not working. Now, if anybody, no matter what your income level is, your money.
That's fractional reserve rating, right?
But the lower income, they have no money
They're
there.
working it for you on the backside,
Right, and
giving
not
you
giving you
pennies on the
anything.
interest.
Right, but if you are in control of how your money is working, when you can go to the grocery store and pay with your Apple stock or whatever, your money is always working. And when you make that decision to buy that big screen TV, now you have this recognition that, man, this money I'm spending has been making me money. I like making money. Versus, oh, no, like 0% APR for 1 year? Whatever, fuck it.
But there's a lot of people that are just barely making it, and they're not holding any values. I mean,
Exactly, and that's
the savings rate is negative.
That's the killer app, right? The way the Federal Reserve dictates policies today, it incentivizes all of us to spend and borrow, right? Because today that I can get a bigger basket of goods with my currency today than a year from now. Right. And so I'm more incentivized to get that balance down to zero to have more than a denomination.
Yeah, but I would say that's people at an income level of the people in this
cryptocurrencies,
room, not at the people that are barely making.
No, but let's talk about this.
Who's to say we're very
So let's say that they're living off $1,000 every 2 weeks. which may be pretty close to the average, like the actual average, like
1,000 every 2 weeks?
that.
That's, I think that's actually too high.
It's 24,000 a year, that's
Yeah.
median income.
Yeah, I thought that was like the average. or
That's the
whatever.
poverty line.
Okay, well, whatever, like what, all that aside, 5% on that is significant to them, like that, you know, that matters.
They aren't holding that money though.
Well, yeah, but
Because
to his
they're
point, for
incentivized to
example,
spend.
if
They can't hold
They
it.
gotta look at the ratio of consumer
In the
debt,
time that
government
it
debt.
takes them a month to spend it, if it's always whatever they keep is earning and they can see that earning, it's going to change the consciousness of their spending habits. And that's the problem is there's no consequence for bad spending habits, and there hasn't been. And that's
Misallocation
been
of
created by
resources.
people that really don't care if you go bankrupt 8 times, like. Like,
a currency based on inflation, you're incentivized to go into debt because, you know, I can buy something for $20,000 of debt today that only costs me $15,000 of today's money to pay off at a later date. So at a consumer level and at a government level, debt is incentivized. Whereas, to his point, in a currency that has a fixed supply that is, in essence, deflationary by nature, I'm not going to go out and go into debt to buy a TV or a couch. I'm going to say, man, if my money is going to be worth more a month from now than it is today, I'm only going to buy the things that I need. And it produces that cultural shift that is driven by economics rather than by regulation or dictate or mandate. It's people acting out of their own economic self-interest, which will
Well,
change the
people are
culture.
frivolous because they see their money make money and they don't want to spend it because it's not just costing them the money they spend, it's costing them future earnings. And if you can instill that in people that are not making as much money, which you really should be if all money is active and working, and 5% is reasonable, you know, even if you have $2,000 in your bank account for a month, you know, people will keep that money in their bank account for that 5%, that's a reward.
Does
you
it
know?
promote growth though? Overall
I mean,
growth, if people are more likely to hold on to
That's-
that.
Should we be promoting growth?
It gives an incentive for producers to
Well,
add more
In our
value
current
faster.
environmental predicament.
I mean,
look at the mechanism in which you're getting that 5%, right? So if your money is parked, right, it's doing nothing, well, so there's some intrinsic value for you to be able to store value in general. I think that's what we talked about with the unbanked side of things. But then this idea of having some balance between my intrinsic value of my my funds being held or going up, but what's the mechanism that makes that happen? It has to be actively spent. That's why banks exist, right? You give them your money to them to actively use it somewhere and give you some derivative of what they've produced from it, right? So it's not
Or what the businesses
Right.
that they gave money to that they produced
yeah,
for the
exactly.
GDP or for whatever.
Right. So having that mechanism of the bank like distributed amongst peers as opposed to in a central entity, that makes a lot of sense. But we have to be careful about it's not parking money, it's giving somebody the power to use it for some good.
So let me ask a quick question. How many people own their house or have a house that they are paying a mortgage on, I guess, or that are not renters? Okay, how many of you have paid cash for your house? I mean, if you don't mind sharing. And okay.
The house I live in?
Yeah, the house that you live in, do you have a mortgage?
Yes.
And how long would it take you to save enough money to buy that house with cash? How many years?
Forever.
60 years ago, how long would it have taken to save for that same exact house? The purchasing power of
In
money is
time
going
of
down.
labor.
That's why people could get a
Yeah,
dog.
there we go.
Also, people
So-
could get a summer
so
job.
Some
money-
sort
Pay
of
for your
measurable
college.
value.
So money is we had a Phil.
Back then too. You got paid less back then as well.
Yeah, but the purchasing power of your dollar went farther. And
Mm.
much of that is, in certain industries, for example, education is a great one. And we see the amount of spending in education has tripled over the last 3 decades, yet performance in education has remained stagnant. And when there are incentivized government-backed programs of the Department of Education basically saying, if you want to get a degree, I don't care what it's in, I'll give you a loan to get that degree, that encourages reckless borrowing on behalf of people. And if a university knows that they're going to get paid by the taxpayer, regardless of whether the student decides to pay them back, of course they're going to increase their
But that's like a
facilities and spend
bad,
more
that's a
money.
bad actor kind of view. I mean, not everything is operating under
It's
that.
regulatory
same-
capture, which has been very heavy in medicine, in housing, and in education.
But I mean, coming back to, I mean, so I had an experience where I spent a significant amount of time in Bolivia in 2000. And I was in this village, and I talked to, there was this owner who had a restaurant and a guest house. And he found a local guy he was German, and he had a local guy that was a Bolivian who had grown up there, and he saw he was a little bit of a hustler. And so he said, hey, I will offer you the ability to share in the additional business that you helped generate by your hustling to get more business for me, and I'm gonna share that with you. Like, to my American mind, I'm like, man, that's brilliant. You know, like you're gonna give them a piece of the business that they bring in. You know what happened? First month, he hustled and he generated all this extra business, he got all this extra income. Second month, he did the same thing. Third month, worked 7 days, said I'll see you at the beginning of next month. He's like, I've got enough money with the extra money I generated by hustling for 7 days to take care of my family and keep them fed and in the house that they were living in. They had no access to credit to buy a car, a motor scooter, a better house or anything, because there was no way that they could see a vision that by hustling and really working hard and being away from the family was going to make a substantive difference to their daily life. And so it's like, I'd rather spend that time with my family, but that didn't work for this guy. Like, he's like, no, that's not the way it's going to work. I want you to be working all 30 days. And I don't want to have a team of 10 people to do it. And so I would argue that our access to credit is what allows us to be able to live the life that we want to live in the now. I mean, there's a boundary condition of overspending, right? And I get that. But ultimately, if we had no ability to buy a house until we had enough money to buy a house, our kids would not grow up in a house that we own. And I would argue that that actually centralizes the power in the few that have the money to be able to be our landlords and to own everything, and that we are subservient to them. And so is that the boundary condition that we want?
But even today, if all fiat were abolished and we only use Bitcoin, I don't think it's feasible to assume that the idea of credit would go away, even if, yeah, I'm making 5% on my money in a year. Well, if I have an opportunity where I think I can start a business that's going to get me 10% on my money, then of course I'm going to borrow money from you.
How are you generating that extra 10%?
If I can start up my own venture that, let's say I want to produce a good or a service that I have a profit margin of 30%.
Right, but there's a maximum supply.
Economics isn't a fixed pie. There's always more wealth that can be created by an individual.
Right, but how do you create it? You've already generated all the wealth that's in existence.
You generate more.
But you can't.
I can go to the woods, chop down a tree, and make a table and sell it to
right,
you.
but you can't print off any more bitcoins. There's a set number of bitcoins. There's a smallest unit of value, right?
Yeah, I can sell the goods that I produce to other people. I'm not selling them to you.
I understand, but there's no way to grow that. Once everyone has all the money once all the bitcoins and once all the satoshis have been divvied out, the only thing that can happen is that satoshi now becomes more valuable. So when I say I'm going to lend you this satoshi, but you have to pay me back too, where are going to get that other satoshi? I mean, I just steal it from
I'm
someone
going to have
else.
to convince you that I'm able to sell my tables to consumers who are going to buy the tables that I'm making, and then I pay you back with the Bitcoin that they paid me for the
So
tables that
I
I
buy
make.
the wood for X amount of Bitcoin, for let's say 100 Bitcoin. I make my table, I sell it for 110 Bitcoin. I've made 10%. I then pay back 105 Bitcoin, and I have 5 extra Bitcoin for me. That's economics 101.
If we were the only two people in the economy and I could only borrow Bitcoin from
That
you
works in
and
one
only
actor,
sell
but
to
when
you,
you have
then
the population of the world acting as the same, we run into an issue where there's just no supply of Bitcoin anymore. We can't create any more Bitcoin to grow it.
then use something
And
else.
things can't
Sure, but
continue
when
to
you
grow.
you're talking about a layer
with a fixed supply.
on top of it. Yeah, now we've added something extra to account for this lack of liquidity.
But you're assuming that Bitcoin's the only medium of exchange that could be used.
Right. In this case, we were saying once all fiat was gone, Bitcoin was it. At least that's what I was
If
thinking.
that were the only currency and no one was able to use anything else as a medium of exchange, then yes, but anything else could be created or used.
Sure, but we've created this thing now that says, hey, we're using this currency, and now we're going to create something else to supplant a shortfall of this one of Bitcoin. Like,
Well, look at the problem that Bitcoin is solving, though. I mean, it's not the end-all solution. It's
I
solving
agree.
a problem, and if it got to that point, then it would be the problem itself.
exactly. I agree. I agree. It's an edge case for sure.
Alright.
Thank you for watching.
That's kind of wrap the official conversations for the night. Feel free to stick around and do everything. Thank you all for coming. It's nice meeting plenty of new faces tonight. Thank you for showing up.